The photograph looks harmless at first, a 1905 gelatin silver print. 3 young women in identical white lawn dresses at Ashfen House, Thornwick County. The Harrowell triplets, Ada, Lila, Beatrice, stand shoulder to shoulder, hair pinned in late Edwardian waves, faces composed the way good families rehearse. Beeswax and coal scent the hall. A metronome clicks faintly from the music room. Somewhere, a servant tests the new electric switch and the sconces hum. Ordinary. Then we lean closer. The magnifying glass catches a sliver of contrast just above the middle sister's collar. Lila. A ring too thin, too perfect, too deliberate for a tear in the emulsion. Not a scratch, not a retoucher's pencil. A line that wants to be seen only when you're close enough to breathe on the glass. This morning is the harvest night ball, and uniformity is the rule. Edwin Harrowell rehearses greetings. Helena counts place cards. Ada checks the quartet. Beatrice jokes about switching identities. Lila arrives in deep green with a silk scarf, despite the warm air hand straying to her throat, as if to make sure it's still there. At 3 o'clock, the photographer unbuckles his leather case and asks for one portrait without accessories. Helena's smile holds. Lila's does not. Before we turn the page, we want, your theory is that line, a retouch, a scar, or something older, pretending to be both. Drop your guess in the comments, and if Vintage Mysteries wind you in, subscribe, so you don't miss what the camera found when the scarf finally came off. Morning swells inside Ashfen House with the clipped rhythm of preparation. In the east wing, Ada Harrowell tightens pearl earrings in her mirror. She is eldest by 7 minutes and carries it like a crown, every gesture precise, every sentence ironed flat. She reviews guest lists with a frown, murmuring names under her breath, as if their weight could steady her pulse. From the corridor comes the smell of beeswax and boiled coffee, a signature of Helena, their mother, whose devotion to appearances fills every room like perfume. Beatrice bursts through the adjoining door in a tea gown of pale blue embroidered cuffs, catching the slant of sunlight. 15 minutes younger, but leagues bolder, she tosses herself onto Ada's bed with a grin. We could swap dresses tonight, she teases, twirling a strand of hair. One of us could play Lila 1 Ada 1B. No one would notice. The joke is old, worn like a family anecdote, yet it hangs heavier now. Because everyone notices Lila. Or rather, everyone notices the scarf. At last, the middle sister steps through the threshold. Lila Harrowell in deep forest green posture, impeccable hair, sleek and pinned silk scarf drawn around her throat despite the warmth. She moves quietly, softly, like the hush of a page turning. Her eyes flick once to her sisters, then down. Always down. Ada thanks her for remembering where she left a pair of earrings. Beatrice studies her, then smiles in that conspiratorial way that hides more questions than it asks. Lila's fingers brush the scarf unconsciously. The fabric hides what the light would otherwise reveal. Downstairs, the patriarch waits. Edwin Harrowell folds his newspaper with the crisp finality of a gavel. At 52, still broad-shouldered, he greets his daughters as my 3 jewels. Ada on his right, Lila in the middle, Beatrice on the left. They reply in near unison, yet his eyes fix on Lila's scarf. Too warm for such an accessory, he says. She lowers her gaze, murmurs something about the morning chill. He studies her long enough that the air feels brittle, then lets it go for now. Helena breezes in soon after summoning lists and servants. The photographer arrives at 3, and, Lila darling, you'll remove that scarf. The neckline is designed to be seen. Her tone is sweet as sugared tea, but beneath it lies command. Lila nods, fingers tightening. After breakfast, the sisters disperse to duties. Ada oversees flowers. Beatrice trails musicians in the gallery. Lila walks the garden paths with a book in hand, but unread. gravel crunches beneath her boots. Roses scent the air geometric and perfect. It is there that Dr. Rowan Hale finds her. He carries his leather satchel like an anchor, his voice gentle, his eyes too sharp. "You've felt it again," he says, not asking but confirming. She admits little only that the evening frightens her. He offers to intervene to plead with her parents. She shakes her head firmly. It is just one night. "I can endure it." He studies her scarf, his jaw tight, but says nothing more. Instead, he asks for a dance at the ball, and the blush that colors her cheek betrays her. In the library, Beatrice corners her later away from Mother's ears. "You haven't slept through a night in months," she says. "You whisper things. You cry. Ever since Aunt Isolde's river house 2 summers ago. You came back with scarves and secrets. We never keep secrets." Lila tries to laugh it off, but Beatrice leans closer. "Let me take your place tonight, just for the portrait. We've fooled people before, if it saves you." "No," Lila cuts her off, though her voice shakes. "We cannot." She presses her scarf with trembling fingers as though it were armor. At precisely 3, the photographer arrives early. His spectacles glint, his case clacks open. The sisters are summoned to the great hall. Servants whisper that the camera waits its brass fittings, catching the light like a blade. Helena instructs them briskly. Ada left Lila center, Beatrice right. The room smells of velvet curtains and coal dust, heavy, oppressive. As they line up, Helena's hand pauses on Lila's scarf. Now she murmurs, "Take it off." Lila's hands tremble as she unties the silk. Ada's breath hitches. Beatrice covers a gasp. Beneath pale skin and a perfect circle, thin and dark, etched like ink into flesh. Not a scratch, not an accident. A ring that looks deliberate, a necklace written by something other than hand. The photographer's smile falters. His fingers twitch over the shutter lever. He recovers quickly, but the unease lingers. Lila tilts her chin to hide it, but she cannot hide the fear in her eyes. The plate is exposed in silence. The long seconds stretch like hours. Beatrice stares. Ada presses her lips into a line. The camera clicks. The image is sealed. A doorway frozen in silver and light, waiting for someone 100 years later to magnify it and see not a scar but a story. The ballroom of Ashfen House blazed with light that night, a proud display of both tradition and modernity. Gas sconces hissed softly along the walls, while new electric bulbs glittered in chandeliers overhead. The glow reflected off polished parquet floors and tall mirrors framed in gilt. Guests arrived in carriages, their laughter rising in puffs of white breath into the cold September air. Inside, the Harrowell name was on every tongue, their 3 identical daughters, the highlight of Thornwick County's harvest season. Ada moved with practiced grace, checking the quartet in the corner, ensuring the champagne was chilled, keeping her mother's long list in order. Beatrice wove between guests with an easy smile, engaging in conversation, yet always watching her sisters. And Lila was the one who drew the stares. Her ivory gown shimmered under the lights, her hair coiled in perfect symmetry with her sister's. Yet every eye searched her neck. Powder and careful posing had muted the mark, but no artifice could erase it. Her serenity seemed rehearsed, a mask that cracked when no one was looking. Dr. Rowan Hale arrived early, cutting an elegant figure in black tailcoat. He bowed to the sisters, but his gaze found Lila with disarming intensity. "You promised me a promenade," he said, offering his arm. She hesitated, then took it, allowing him to steer her along the edge of the ballroom, always keeping her turned so that her neck faced away from the most curious onlookers. To casual guests, it looked like a doctor's polite courtship. To Beatrice, who followed at a careful distance, it looked like guardianship, urgent, deliberate. When they slipped into the quieter corridor toward the library, Beatrice followed, steps muted against the carpet. The door was ajar. She saw Rowan dabbing at Lila's throat with a handkerchief, removing Helena's powder. And then she saw the truth. The ring glowed faint green, not scar tissue but symbols, precise and sharp, as if etched by fire and kept alive by some rhythm beneath the skin. Rowan whispered words she could just make out alignment cycle Isolde's notes. Beatrice pressed herself against the doorframe, heart hammering. The light from her sister's neck pulsed against the leather spines of books, each beat a warning. Inside, Lila trembled. Rowan spoke with a doctor's composure but the urgency of a man out of time. "It began with your aunt, didn't it? The stone disc you found in her attic. You told me it burned when you touched it. That was no accident. The mark is a doorway, and tonight, 2 years to the day, it opens again. You cannot resist. We must follow the ritual." Lila's eyes shone with fear. "And if I refuse, then it stays," he answered, his voice grim. "It takes more than you are prepared to lose." Beatrice could not stay silent. She pushed the door open. "Then I'm coming," she said. Both turned startled. Rowan's jaw tightened, but Lila's eyes softened with relief. No, it's dangerous." Beatrice stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "Triplets don't divide. Whatever happens, I stand with you." The silence that followed was broken only by the library clock striking 11, its chimes falling heavy as stone. Rowan conceded quickly. "Then you must know. We need the artifact, the disc. I keep it safe in my home. At midnight by the river, the stars will align as they did when your aunt first invoked it. Only then can we control what passes through. Only then can she survive." Lila shivered her hand, pressing against the glowing ring as if to contain it. "And if the ritual fails," Rowan's face darkened, "then the entity remains and your body is its vessel." In the ballroom, laughter swelled, violins tuned, unaware of the pact being sealed just down the corridor. Their plan was set. At 11:30, Rowan's colleague would stage a fainting spell to draw attention, while servants and guests crowded to assist the sisters, and Rowan would slip away. The carriage would wait at the south gate, lanterns hidden wheels muffled against stone. Beatrice reached for Lila's hand, squeezing it tightly. "You won't face it alone again. This time, whatever waits on the river, we'll face it together." Lila's eyes glistened. "Promise me, Bea. If it chooses not to leave, if it tries to stay, you must help him end it." Beatrice nodded, though her throat felt carved from ice. "I promise." As the library clock ticked toward the next quarter hour, the sisters and the doctor stood in a fragile triangle, youth duty and fear bound by something older than them all. Outside, the autumn night pressed against the windows. The river was waiting. So were the stars. The carriage rolled through the sleeping countryside, iron wheels striking sparks on hidden stones. Lanterns swung from the sides, casting restless shadows across the hedgerows, as if the night itself were following. Inside, Beatrice sat rigid, her hand laced tightly with Lila's. Across from them, Dr. Rowan Hale kept his satchel on his knees, fingers resting on the worn leather as though it were a reliquary. The artifact inside the stone disc Aunt Isolde once guarded with her life was silent for now. Yet the glow seeping from Lila's throat was enough to light the interior with a ghostly green, sparing them the need for lamps. Each pulse of light quickened as the horses clattered closer to the river. Lila had changed from her gown into a plainer frock before leaving Ashfen House, its darker fabric more suited to movement and to concealment. But no cloth could conceal what lived beneath her skin. The ring of symbols on her neck seemed to breathe, contracting and loosening, as if the flesh itself remembered another rhythm. She kept her chin lowered, though there was no one to witness her shame here. Beatrice studied her, unable to look away, torn between horror and the aching desire to protect her sister from everything parents' pride, society's whispers, and now whatever waited beneath the stars. Rowan checked his pocket watch, the metal catching a stray glint of green. "We arrive in minutes," he murmured. "The alignment peaks just before midnight. That is when the doorway will open." Beatrice swallowed. "And what if it refuses to leave?" His eyes flicked up sharp. "Then we enforce the contingency. The sedative must render her unconscious before the entity completes its tether." Otherwise, he stopped, unwilling to give the thought shape. Beatrice knew enough, otherwise Lila would never return. The carriage jolted to a stop at the old ferry, crossing a place where locals said the current was strongest, where ferrymen swore they sometimes saw shapes in the water by moonlight. Tonight, the river gleamed like polished slate, unbroken, patient. Rowan instructed the driver to wait. "If we do not return by the hour's turn, you are to tell Mr. Harrowell his daughters are with me at a medical emergency in the village. Nothing more, nothing less." The driver, pale beneath his cap, nodded quickly and crossed himself before looking away. The three walked down a narrow path under a canopy of ancient oaks. The air was damp alive with the scent of moss and wet stone. An owl hooted, once then fell silent, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. When they reached the riverbank, the moon slid from behind a cloud, a quarter slice of light that made the water ripple like black glass. The world seemed balanced on the cusp of revelation. Rowan knelt, opening his satchel. He drew out the stone disc, dark and cold, its surface engraved with the same sigils now glowing on Lila's skin. He placed it carefully on a flat rock by the water, then withdrew a folded paper containing dried herbs and a vial of liquid that caught the moonlight like oil. "This mixture," he explained softly, "reinforces the barrier. And this," he lifted the vial, "is the sedative. If she falters, if she begins to slip beyond herself, we must use it." Lila shrugged off her cloak and handed it to Beatrice. In the moonlight, with the green fire pulsing at her throat, she looked otherworldly, caught between familiar and strange. Her eyes met her sister's. "Whatever happens, you must not interfere. Promise me." Beatrice clenched the cloak to her chest. "I promise." The words cut her tongue like glass. Then Lila stepped into the water. Ripples widened from her boots as she waded deeper, first to her knees, then her waist. The river closed around her like a dark embrace. Rowan lifted the disc and began to recite, his voice low and guttural-shaped syllables that sounded like stone grinding against stone, then soared into flowing cadences that rippled like water. The air itself vibrated each word, clinging to the night as if reluctant to fade. The symbols on Lila's throat responded instantly. They detached from her skin, rising into the air like fireflies arranged by unseen geometry. They circled her head faster and faster, casting patterns onto the surface of the water. A shimmer appeared above the river, subtle at first like heat haze, then more precise angles and curves forming patterns that made Beatrice's eyes water when she tried to follow. The river began to churn, though no wind stirred it. Lila threw her head back, eyes closed, arms outstretched. The symbols pulsed with such intensity that the entire bank glowed green, illuminating the oaks like twisted specters. Then the scream came, a sound so raw and searing that Beatrice staggered forward instinctively, only to stop herself at the memory of her promise. Rowan's chant grew louder, commanding a counterpoint to the agony tearing from Lila's throat. Suddenly, silence. The water stilled. The symbols floated just above Lila's face, spinning in a furious halo. Then her lips parted and another voice poured out. It was not hers. It was layered, resonant, vibrating bone and soil. "I am here." The words rolled across the river, making ripples spread outward in defiance of gravity. Beatrice's knees buckled. Rowan's face dripped with sweat as he continued the incantation, though his voice trembled. The entity turned Lila's body with unsettling grace, moving joints too fluidly, steps too exact. Her eyes opened, glowing the same green as the circling symbols. It regarded Beatrice first, another, similar. Echo, its head tilted, three born as one, stability. Beatrice's throat went dry, but she whispered, "She is my sister, my blood, she is not yours." The voice inside Lila laughed, humorless. "Blood is door, echo is anchor. This form, suitable, I could remain." Rowan faltered. "The pact is temporary, you withdraw at alignment's end." The entity's gaze swung to him cold and ancient. Agreements change. For a heartbeat, the air thickened as if the river would rise to drown them all. Rowan shot a desperate look to Beatrice. The sedative be ready. But the entity only laughed again, then stilled. The symbols spun faster, then darted upward, vanishing into the shimmering distortion above the river. The void folded in on itself, collapsing into the night sky until only ordinary stars remained. Lila's body convulsed, then crumpled into the shallows. Beatrice splashed forward, catching her as Rowan rushed to her side. He pressed fingers to her pulse. "She lives," he said hoarsely. Lila's eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes were her own, again, soft brown, confused. "Is it?" "Gone." Beatrice stroked wet hair from her forehead. "Yes, it's gone." Rowan's voice cut in grim. "Not gone, withdrawn. It will return when the stars call again. 2 years." The green ring had faded but remained etched into her flesh, dormant, waiting. On the far bank, the oaks stood like witnesses. The river murmured softly, carrying secrets downstream. And above the stars burned cold, indifferent, as if keeping their own tally. The cycle had not ended. It had only begun. The carriage creaked back through the lanes toward Ashfen House, its lanterns muffled beneath dark shades. Inside, silence pressed heavier than the velvet seats. Lila slumped against Beatrice's shoulder, her skin clammy, her breath shallow but steady. The mark at her throat no longer burned with green fire, yet it remained unmistakable, a faint ring, darker than flesh, etched like a secret signature. Beatrice held her close eyes darting to Dr. Rowan Hale across from them. His hands still rested on the satchel, the stone disc inside now inert, its carvings dull as dead ash. "You will tell them," Beatrice asked at last, her voice low but sharp. Rowan shook his head. "Not tonight, not until we understand more. Your parents would call it hysteria, or worse, madness. They would force physicians upon her who do not believe. That would be fatal." His words were iron, leaving no space for protest. Beatrice wanted to fight, but one glance at Lila's fragile state bound her tongue. When the carriage rattled into the estate's drive, lamps still glowed in the ballroom. Music and laughter spilled faintly into the night, as if the household had never noticed their absence. Rowan helped them slip through the conservatory side door, avoiding servants. "Say she fainted from exhaustion," he advised. "Say I escorted her to my office." Close enough to truth. He bowed briefly, then vanished into the dark before they could thank him. In the east wing, Ada was waiting perched on a chaise with folded arms. Her eyes, identical to her sister's, yet colder tonight, swept over Lila and the wet hem of her frock. "You disappeared," she said flatly. Mother nearly collapsed with worry. "What have you done?" Beatrice bristled, but Lila whispered, "Later. Please not now." She drifted into her room and closed the door. Ada's gaze hardened on Beatrice. "You know something." Beatrice hesitated. Secrets pressed against her lips like a flood behind a dam. But she remembered the promise. "I know enough," she replied. "And it isn't your burden yet." Ada's mouth tightened, but she said no more. Days passed. The harvest ball ended with polite gossip about fainting ladies and candlelit dances, but within the family walls the air felt brittle. Lila resumed her habit of scarves, though Beatrice now saw them differently, not as fashion, but as armor. At night, she sometimes heard her sister's stifled cries echo through the corridor, though no one else seemed to notice. Ada buried herself deeper into duties blind by choice, or perhaps by fear. Years later, those silences left trails in the archive. The present-day narrator, a historian, leafing through Thornwick County records, traces them like fingerprints. He reads faded letters from Lila Harrowell to a cousin in Bath. Lila grows thin again. I fear nerves, though Rowan insists her constitution is strong. A marginal note in Ada's hand precise clipped mentions recurrence without explanation, and in the county library bound in cracked leather lie the remnants of Aunt Isolde Whitcomb's journals. Half-burned pages, water damage, ink bleeding. Yet enough survives lunar charts, crude sketches of the stone disk, and one haunting line the triplets bind more strongly than one vessel alone. Stability is a gift and a curse. The historian lingers on that phrase voice thick with unease. He magnifies a surviving photograph of the sisters at the ball. On the negative, the thin line around Lila's throat appears darker, sharper, almost etched into the plate itself. On the developed print, the retoucher has softened it with pencil, yet no manipulation can erase it. Not a scratch, the narrator intones. Not an accident, a doorway taught to hide in plain sight. More documents emerge. A letter from a chemist to Dr. Hale, dated 1906, describes residues of phosphorescent quality on fabric sent for testing Lila's scarf. The chemist speculates about a mineral unknown to him, luminescent even without exposure to light. His words end abruptly, as if he abandoned the experiment. No follow-up correspondence has been found. The historian's voice lowers, coaxing the audience closer. If you pause the frame and look at the scarf under ultraviolet light, faint outlines reappear, shapes mirroring the ring around her throat. Was the fabric absorbing what the flesh could not contain? He lets the question hang unanswered. Beatrice's later notes, discovered among family effects, offer glimpses into her silent guardianship. One reads, "She will not speak of that night yet. She dreams of water. I hear her whispering in her sleep words that are not words. I will not let her face it alone when the stars return." Rowan Hale himself vanishes from local records after 1917. His death is not listed. Instead, a penciled receipt notes a loan of artifact to a private collector name smudged beyond recognition. The artifact, the stone disc, disappears from history after that. Some say it sank into the river with Hale's carriage during a storm. Others suggest it was locked away in a London cabinet of curiosities. The historian concludes with an uneasy breath. The Harrowell story does not end in 1905. It lingers in gaps, letters unfinished, photographs, retouched artifacts lost. But the river remembers. The stars, too, remember. And if Aunt Isolde was right, the alignment returns not once, but many times. The screen fades back to the original photograph, sepia and solemn. Three sisters stand still, eyes fixed on eternity. Yet the viewer's gaze is inevitably drawn to the middle one, to the thin dark line just visible above the lace collar. The historian's voice. Was it scar trick or scripture written on skin? That is for you to decide. And then he turns directly to the audience. If you want us to uncover more Isolde's remaining journals, the chemist's missing notes, tell us in the comments. Subscribe, because the next alignment on the charts is closer than you think. The music swells low and tense like a drumbeat in a darkened theater. The frame lingers on Lila's eyes identical to her sister's, but not quite the same. Autumn has returned to Thornwick County more than a century later, but the past still breathes in its soil. The historian, our present-day guide, walks through the county museum where glass cases display fragments of a family now spoken of in whispers. He pauses before a gilt frame, the portrait of the three Harrowell sisters, their identical faces, watching from 1905. Dust motes drift in the light. Schoolchildren pass by, scarcely noticing. Yet to those who linger, the photograph unsettles. Their gazes always circle back to the middle sister, to the faint, perfect ring that no retoucher could erase. From his satchel, the historian produces a small velvet box loaned by Evelyn Barron, granddaughter of Beatrice. Inside rests a locket, tarnished but intact. When opened, it reveals a miniature painting of the sisters. Behind it, hidden in the hinge, lies a folded sliver of paper, a rubbing of symbols from the lost stone disc. The markings faint but deliberate echo those burned into Lila's throat. Evelyn's voice trembles as she recalls childhood memories. My grandmother would hush whenever Lila's name came up. She'd say, "Some doors don't stay closed even when you lock them." I thought it was a metaphor. Now, I'm not so sure. The historian layers maps, star charts, and documents across a table. Aunt Isolde's journals, though damaged, contained meticulous notes on celestial alignments. Cross-referenced with modern astronomy software, they reveal chilling precision. In 1905, the stars formed a pattern identical to that of an ancient alignment recorded in Sumerian tablets. And now, in less than 2 years, the same configuration will return. The alignment, the river, the silence of the artifact, all pieces waiting to snap back together like iron filings to a magnet. He reads aloud from a letter never sent, found in Ada's private papers. I cannot bear to look at her. The mark pulses even through fabric. She smiles at us, but her eyes plead for release. Beatrice believes we must wait together when the sky repeats its course. I dread what that means. Ada, ever the loyal daughter to society's demands, could not reconcile her sense of order with the chaos she glimpsed in her sister's neck. Her silence, her refusal to acknowledge, was its own kind of betrayal. The historian projects the old photograph onto a screen, magnifying the neck until the pixels break apart. Within the line appear tiny shapes, not random at all, but forming an alphabet, curves and angles, repeating like the cycles of the moon. Not scar, he whispers. Not flaw. Inscription. The camera lingers, inviting the viewer to lean closer, to imagine what it would feel like to bear another language etched into one's flesh. Speculation grows heavier. Did Lila live through further cycles? Did she succumb as Aunt Isolde had? The parish register notes her death in 1911, sudden, unexplained. Yet the margin of the register bears a strange annotation. Initials not belonging to any priest, and a phrase half smeared withdrawn, but not ended. Beatrice lived longer, marrying, raising children, yet her diaries circle back always to Lila. She dreams of rivers. Sometimes she wakes speaking in voices I do not know. Ada, the eldest, maintained propriety until the end, though her private letters suggest that the silence haunted her. The historian closes the parish register, his hands unsteady. 3 sisters, 3 choices, denial, guardianship, and surrender. And yet the door marked only one. He turns toward the modern camera voice, lowering. In 2 years, the sky will return to its place. If the disc still exists somewhere in a collector's case or buried in the river mud, then the doorway will remember its host. The question is what happens when the family is gone, but the bloodline remains. Images shift the black surface of the river beneath a modern bridge, its waters catching the reflection of sodium lamps. A drone camera tilts skyward to constellations unchanged by time. The historian's words hover over the images like a benediction and a warning. Some mysteries do not end. They wait, and sometimes the stars themselves are the clock. The final shot returns once more to the photograph. The 3 Harrowell sisters stand eternal, their lace collars stiff, their eyes unsmiling. The music fades to a single drumbeat, steady, relentless. The camera zooms closer, closer still, until nothing fills the frame but the line around Lila's throat, black, perfect, patient. Was it scar? Was it mark? Or was it doorway? Tell us what you believe. Was Lila cursed, chosen, or simply consumed by her own curiosity? Leave your theory in the comments. And subscribe, because when the sky shifts again, we will be there to search the riverbanks of Thornwick to see if the doorway still remembers. The photograph lingers one final moment before the screen fades to black. Only the sound of water remains lapping endlessly against unseen shores.